I returned from Iraq after 18 months of deployment. My father said, "We were told you died in that bombing." I stood in the doorway of my childhood home with my duffel bag still slung over my shoulder, processing what my father had just said. The words hung in the air between us like smoke from an explosion, thick and impossible to see through clearly. Behind him, I could see my mother frozen at the kitchen table, her coffee cup halfway to her lips, her face drained of color in a way that had nothing to do with surprise or joy. My younger sister Bethany was standing at the bottom of the stairs, her phone clutched in her hand, and the expression on her face wasn't relief or happiness at seeing her brother alive. It was something closer to horror, or maybe calculation, like she was doing math in her head, and the numbers weren't adding up the way she needed them to. My father, Gordon, was a big man who'd worked construction his entire adult life, and he filled the doorway with his bulk in a way that seemed almost defensive, like he was blocking entry rather than welcoming me home. His hands were shaking slightly as he gestured at me, pointing like I was an apparition he couldn't quite believe was real. He repeated it again, slower this time, enunciating each word with deliberate care. "We were told you died in that bombing 3 months ago. The army sent us notification. We had a memorial service. Your mother collected the death benefits." The way he said it made it sound like an accusation, like I'd done something wrong by surviving, like my continued existence was an inconvenience that needed explaining. I set my duffel bag down on the porch and pulled out my phone, scrolling to my email where I'd received confirmation of my homecoming orders dated 6 weeks ago. I'd sent multiple messages to my family through Facebook and email, letting them know I was coming home, giving them the exact date and approximate time my flight would arrive. None of them had responded, which I'd chalked up to them being busy or maybe planning some kind of surprise welcome home party. Now I realized the silence had meant something entirely different. I showed my father the email, but he barely glanced at it before his eyes shifted back to my face with an expression I couldn't quite identify, something between anger and fear, desperation and resentment all mixed together into something ugly. My mother finally stood up from the table, her chair scraping against the linoleum floor with a sound that seemed too loud in the strange silence. She walked toward me slowly, like she was approaching a wild animal that might bolt or attack without warning. When she reached me, she touched my arm tentatively, her fingers cold even through my uniform sleeve. Her voice came out in a whisper that I had to lean forward to hear properly. "They said you were in a vehicle that got hit by an IED outside Fallujah. They said there were no survivors. The casualty assistance officer came to our house and showed us the paperwork." She pulled away from me and wrapped her arms around herself, and I noticed she was wearing new jewelry, expensive-looking pieces I'd never seen before, a diamond bracelet and matching earrings that caught the afternoon light coming through the kitchen window. Bethany finally spoke up from her position by the stairs, her voice tight and controlled in a way that reminded me of how she used to sound when she was lying to our parents about where she'd been or what she'd done. "There must have been some mistake with the records," she said, looking at her phone screen rather than at me. "Some kind of administrative error with the casualty reports. It happens all the time with the military. They probably mixed up your name with someone else who actually died." The way she emphasized actually made my stomach turn, like she was suggesting I should have been the one who died instead of whoever really got killed in that bombing. I asked her what she meant by that, and she just shrugged and said nothing, but her eyes told a different story. I picked up my duffel bag and pushed past my father into the house. 18 months of deployment had taken a toll on my body, and I'd been looking forward to collapsing on my old bed and sleeping for about 3 days straight, letting the tension drain out of my shoulders and the nightmares fade into something manageable. Instead, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table where I'd eaten thousands of meals growing up, feeling like a stranger in a place that should have been safe and familiar. My mother brought me a glass of water without being asked, and I noticed her hands were shaking badly enough that some of it slopped over the rim and onto the table. She didn't meet my eyes when she set it down in front of me. My father stayed in the doorway. He pulled out his phone and made a call, speaking in low tones I couldn't quite make out, but I caught fragments. He mentioned my name, said something about a situation that needed handling, asked when someone could come over to verify something. When he hung up, he looked at me, and he told me we needed to wait for someone from the army to come and straighten this out. He made it sound like I was the problem that needed fixing, not whatever bureaucratic nightmare had declared me dead when I was very much alive. I asked my mother about the death benefits she'd mentioned, and she went pale again, her hand flying to her throat, where a new gold necklace sat heavy against her collarbone. She stuttered something about it being held in trust, about not having touched it yet, but her eyes darted to my father in a way that screamed dishonesty. Full story on my channel and linked below.